November 1935. The wind from the Hudson River blew into Harlem, carrying a biting chill and the musty smell of the old brick buildings. Bumpy Johnson sat in the dark corner of a barber shop on Lenox Avenue. On the table was an ebony chessboard, beside which sat a glass of cheap but warm cognac. His opponent was Nat Pettigrew, a loyal but hot-tempered gangster. "Checkmate," Bumpy said softly, his voice deep and resonant, like a bass guitar. He moved the black bishop up a square, blocking the white king's escape route. Nat scratched his head, grimacing. "Boss, I give up. But hey, have you heard anything about those guys in the East End? The new guys?" Bumpy took a sip of his cognac, his eyes still fixed on the chessboard. "The Chinese, I thought they were just hanging around Chinatown selling wonton noodles and doing laundry." "No, this time it's different, Bumpy." Nat lowered his voice, his expression serious. "They're not selling noodles. They're running a gambling den. And worse, they're paying out 700 to 1 for the lottery. People are flocking there." Bumpy froze. His wine glass hovered in midair. In Harlem, the standard odds were 600 to 1. Anyone who undercuts the market is declaring war. The numbers game is the lifeblood of Harlem. Anyone who messes with it messes with Bumpy Johnson's livelihood. "Who's in charge?" Bumpy asked, his sharp gaze shifting from the chessboard to Nat. "They call him Master Wang. Rumor has it he's from Hong Kong, fleeing a Kuomintang persecution. He brings a gang of thugs, not using guns much, mostly machetes, and some bizarre martial arts." Bumpy stood up, putting on his black woolen overcoat. He adjusted his fedora hat, concealing the raised scar on the back of his neck. "All right, let's go see what this Hong Kong dragon looks like, whether he spits fire or just phlegm." The Hong Kong gang's base was on the edge of Harlem, where it intersected with the Italian Quarter, a former abandoned warehouse complex that had once been a textile factory. When Bumpy's sleek black Buick pulled up, the atmosphere was eerily silent. There was no jazz music, no boisterous laughter from the black crowd. Only the faint scent of incense wafted from the cracks in the doors and the flickering red lanterns. Bumpy stepped out of the car with 4 bodyguards, including Nat. They carried revolvers and switchblades. Bumpy knocked on the door. 3 distinct knocks. The door opened. A thin, slanted-eyed Asian youth dressed in traditional black silk stood blocking the way. He didn't speak English, only gestured for them to come in. Inside, the warehouse had been completely renovated. Red carpet stretched across the floor, and ornate rosewood furniture adorned with dragon and phoenix carvings hung from the ceiling. Opium smoke drifted lazily from the high ceiling. In the middle of the room, a middle-aged man sat drinking tea. That was Wang. He was about 50 years old, with a mustache, bald head, and 2 metal balls twirling in his hands, making a clicking sound. He wasn't as big as Bumpy, but he exuded a deadly silent aura. "Mr. Johnson," Wang said in broken but clear English, without bothering to stand up. "Please sit down. Thai Guanyin tea, freshly imported from Fujian." Bumpy didn't sit. He stood tall, hands in his pockets, where a cold pistol lay waiting. "I didn't come for tea, Mr. Wang. I came to teach you a basic Harlem math problem." Bumpy said, his voice icy. "Here the odds are 600 to 1. You pay 700, you're disrupting the market. You're taking money from my people's pockets and from mine." Wang sneered, setting down his teacup. The porcelain clinked against the saucer with a sharp, crisp sound. "A free market, Mr. Johnson. The people of Harlem are poor. I'm giving them hope. What's wrong with that, or is it?" Wang looked up, his gaze sharp as a razor. "That the godfather of Harlem is afraid of losing to a stranger from afar." "This isn't fear." Bumpy stepped forward, his bodyguard stirring. "This is order. You have 24 hours to close this casino and return to Chinatown. Otherwise, I'll turn this place into a graveyard." Wang suddenly stood up. In a flash, he pulled a folding fan from his sleeve. Flap. The fan opened, its sharp metal edges gleaming. "We Hong Kongers have a saying, a mighty dragon crosses the river. Once a dragon crosses the river, it doesn't turn back. In 24 hours, if you want war, I'll show you that the blood of people of color and the blood of people of color are equally red." Bumpy stared at Wang for a long time. He knew this man wasn't some petty thug. He was a disciplined fanatic. "All right," Bumpy nodded, turning and walking away. "Keep your head safe, Wang." 24 hours later, Bumpy's warning had expired, but Wang had already struck. That night, Bumpy's 3 biggest lottery outlets were attacked simultaneously. But not with Thompson submachine guns like the Italian mafia usually did, nor with violent vandalism. The attackers, dressed in black and masked, moved like ghosts across the rooftops. They jumped down from the sunroofs, armed with cleavers and nunchucks. At outlet number 125, Nat Pettigrew was counting money when he heard the sound of shattering glass. Before he could draw his gun, a gleaming blade whizzed past his ear and embedded itself in the wooden wall behind him. "What the hell?" Nat yelled. 6 shadowy figures rushed in. They didn't shoot. They slashed. The cuts were sharp, clean, and ruthless. Bumpy's gang members, accustomed to loud gunfights, were completely overwhelmed by the frenzied close-quarters combat and speed of the Hong Kong gang. Within 15 minutes, 3 of Bumpy's territories were devastated. All the money was stolen. 6 of his men were seriously wounded, 2 dead. On the chest of each victim, they left an ancient coin with a square hole in the middle, a hallmark of the Hong Kong gang. Bumpy received the bad news while dining at Wells' restaurant. He didn't bang on the table, he didn't shout. His face darkened calm as still water before a storm. "They want to fight with knives," Bumpy whispered, his hand crushing the wine glass, the shards cutting into his flesh, drawing blood without him noticing. "Fine. I'll show them what the law of the jungle is like in Harlem." Bumpy realized he was up against an enemy with superior hand-to-hand combat skills. Gunfire at close range in the narrow alleyways of Harlem was sometimes less effective than the agility of Chinese martial arts. Bumpy decided to change tactics. He approached Frank Costello, the Italian mafia boss, to borrow heavy weapons, but Costello refused, not wanting to get involved in a new racial conflict. Bumpy was alone. He remembered an old friend from prison, a former Marine who had fought in Shanghai, who understood the workings of the triads. This man pointed out Wang's weakness, arrogance, and territorial boundaries. Bumpy set a trap. He had people spread rumors that he would personally transport a large suitcase of money to ransom back his territory on Christmas Eve. On Christmas Eve, 1935, snow blanketed Harlem. Wang's convoy blocked Bumpy's car at Mount Morris Park. The Hong Kong group, confident in their martial arts skills, engaged in close combat. But this time, Bumpy wasn't using a regular gun. When the truck door opened, there wasn't money but 20 of Harlem's most skilled gunmen armed with short-barreled shotguns, the ultimate weapon against close combat fighters. "Merry Christmas," Bumpy yelled. A barrage of bullets ripped through the night. Martial arts couldn't withstand shotgun blasts at close range. Wang's elite troops were wiped out in an instant. Wang, severely wounded, tried to flee towards the warehouse. Bumpy pursued him alone, his familiar switchblade in hand. The final confrontation took place on the snow-covered rooftop of the warehouse. May 1968, a sweltering and turbulent summer. It all began with the strange deaths of Bumpy's former close associates. Nat Pettigrew, his loyal old bodyguard, was found dead in his apartment. The police concluded it was a heart attack, but Bumpy knew Nat was as strong as can be. At the morgue, Bumpy silently examined his old friend's body. He lifted Nat's eyelids and discovered a tiny red dot, almost invisible to the naked eye, deep within the mucous membrane of the eye. "Poisonous needle," Bumpy muttered. A chilling memory from 33 years ago flooded back. The next day, a package arrived at Bumpy's apartment on Lenox Terrace. Inside were no bombs, no ransom notes. There was only a dilapidated old folding fan, its ribs broken, stained with dried dark blood. Wang's fan from 1935. And a piece of silk paper written in bright red ink. "Blood debt must be repaid with blood, both principal and interest." The old enemy was not dead. Or if he was dead, he had raised another demon to return and collect the debt. Bumpy mobilized all his informants in Harlem to search for the stranger. But Harlem in 1968 was too crowded and chaotic. Finally, news came from Frank Lucas, then Bumpy's trusted henchman and apprentice. "Boss, a new group of Asians has rented the basement of the old textile factory, the place you burned down 30 years ago." Bumpy knew he couldn't bring his guns there and fire them like he did in his youth. The FBI was watching him 24/7. The New York police were just waiting for him to make a mistake so they could arrest him. He decided to go alone, taking only a driver with him. In the damp basement of the old textile factory, Bumpy confronted his enemy. Sitting on the wooden chair wasn't Wang, but a young man about 25 years old with a handsome sculpted face but emotionless eyes. His name was Lee. "Where's Wang?" Bumpy asked, his voice hoarse. "My father died 10 years ago in Kowloon from a recurring old wound. The wound he inflicted," Lee said in fluent English, his tone cold. "Before he died, he didn't leave any last words about money. He only wanted me to bring his head back to his grave." "I spared your father's life," Bumpy said calmly. "That was pity, not weakness." Lee chuckled faintly. "The people of Hong Kong don't need pity. We need honor. Tonight, I won't just take your life. I'll unleash the purest heroin Harlem has ever seen, laced with a deadly poison. Tomorrow, thousands of your addicts will die. Bumpy Johnson's empire will collapse in a sea of blood, and the curses of the Harlem people themselves." Bumpy looked at Lee. He realized this young man's ruthlessness far surpassed his father's. Wang only wanted territory, while Lee wanted to destroy everything. "You're playing a game of chess without understanding the rules, son." Bumpy turned and walked away. "I'm giving you one last chance. Get out of here before sunset." Back at headquarters, Bumpy convened an emergency meeting. He knew he couldn't let Lee carry out his plan to poison the supply. If thousands died, Harlem would descend into chaos, and Bumpy would be a historical villain. But he also couldn't kill Lee publicly. Lee had connections to the international triads. Killing him would invite a global gang war to New York. Bumpy needed a way to make them disappear completely, as if they never existed. He made a secret phone call to a corrupt police inspector he had nurtured for years, and a shady figure in the CIA who were looking to clean up drug trafficking networks outside their control from the Golden Triangle. "I'll give you a big haul," Bumpy said into the phone. "But in return, the case file must be clean. No records, no press, only dust." That night, Bumpy ordered his men to withdraw all their forces from the old textile factory area. He created a security vacuum, making Lee believe that Bumpy was fearfully retreating into a defensive posture. Confident Lee gathered his entire gang, about 50 assassins and drug experts, in the basement to prepare the shipment of poison to be released the following morning. 3 a.m. It was raining heavily. Bumpy Johnson stood on the rooftop of the building opposite, shielding himself with a black umbrella, looking down at the textile factory. He looked old and weary, a pang of heart pain occasionally shooting through his chest. "Boss, everything's ready," Frank Lucas whispered from behind. Bumpy nodded. He didn't use a gun. He used gas. The ventilation system of the old textile factory had been secretly modified by Bumpy's men. Instead of pumping air, they pumped in a large amount of CO, carbon monoxide, and flammable gas leaking from the city's pipelines. Down in the basement, Lee and his men began to feel drowsy, their limbs aching for no apparent reason. By the time Lee noticed the strange smell, it was too late. He tried to rush out the door, but the emergency exits had been heat-sealed from the outside. Bumpy lit a cigarette, took a long drag, then flicked the burning cigarette into a puddle of gasoline that had spilled from the pipe into the factory's ventilation shaft.
After reading both parts of this story, the feeling that lingered in me was a coldness, not from snow or rain, but from the brutal clash between two ideologies. The work successfully portrays Bumpy Johnson not just as a gangster, but as a ruthless strategist of the underworld. Below are the points I appreciated most when reflecting on the work's overall narrative. 1. The conflict between romance and reality. The biggest highlight in the first part is the contrast. The Hong Kong faction Wang represents the pride and romance of the martial arts world. They uphold the principle of the mighty dragon crossing the river, believing in individual skill and honor. The Harlem faction Bumpy represents the stark pragmatism of American streets. I was extremely impressed with the way the conflict was resolved in 1935. The moment Bumpy used a shotgun to confront martial arts wasn't just an action scene, it was a declaration. In Harlem, efficiency is paramount. The film exposed Wang's naivety in trying to impose gentlemanly rules in a place where only the law of the jungle prevailed. It was the inevitable collapse of beauty in the face of brutality. 2. The terrifying evolution of evil. If the first part was just a territorial brawl, the second part, 1968, elevated Bumpy to another level. I shuddered at the character's maturity. At 62, Bumpy in the film no longer relied on brute force. He used intelligence and systems. The detail of Bumpy cooperating with corrupt police and the CIA to eliminate his enemies reveals a terrifying political vision. He understood that to eradicate the problem completely, it wasn't enough to just kill people. He had to eliminate their legal existence as well. The young opponent Lee failed miserably, not because he was weak, but because he was too emotional, hateful, wanting to poison the people. Meanwhile, Bumpy was as cold as an iceberg, viewing the killing as a clean, traceless solution. 3. The art of erasure. This is the point I appreciate most in terms of the work's ideology. The ending, explaining the disappearance of the Hong Kong gang, is a brilliant move. It evokes an existential fear. In the bloody history of the underworld, how many powerful forces have vanished without a trace, simply because they encountered godfathers who knew how to manipulate history. The image of the fire in the textile factory basement not only burns corpses, it burns memories. The fact that the press reported it as a workplace accident is a biting satire on the truth, which is inherently fragile and easily distorted by those in power.